Come along with us as we explore the broad world of preservation and the work being done to preserve, interpret, and save our past in a 21st century world. From aquaculture to historic foodways to forensic modeling, we're talking weekly with experts from across the globe. This is your host, Nick Redding. Welcome to PreserveCast. This is Nick Redding. You're listening to PreserveCast. We are absolutely thrilled to be sitting down with the incredibly talented Jamie Loftus. And we're going to be talking with her about her most recent book, Raw Dog, The Naked Truth About Hot Dogs. Jamie's a comedian, an Emmy Award-nominated TV writer, podcaster, and today we're going to be talking about her work as an author. Like everyone that we interview on PreserveCast, and we're looking at this as sort of this exploration into the history of hot dogs and hot dogs in a moment in time here in American history. We'd love to get to know the people that we're talking to. And so for a lot of people that we talk to, it's about preservation and about work in history or museums or whatever aspect of that is. But as someone who was able to inject both humor and history into your work, what put you on the path to all of this? What put you on the path to humor and hot dogs? But was there a spark moment? Like, when did you decide you wanted to go down this road? And in particular, when did you decide you wanted to write this book?
It was definitely a slow process that led up to this. I definitely would not have been what I guessed I would end up doing. But I've been a comedian forever. And, around the time of, to pay the bills, I was also writing a lot and doing some reporting. And so I was always sort of doing both of those things, but they would rarely come together in a way that felt cohesive. It felt very, like a two-sided thing. I was either inhabiting one persona or the other. And then around 2019, 2020, I was able to sort of start figuring out how can I combine these skills, because I really, really like reporting, especially like super niche kind of gonzo style reporting. And then I had the experience of being a comedian, and it was just like, okay, let me figure out how I can get this sort of combined. And so the first, I think, like major kind of experiment I did with that was ended up being this project called My Year in Mensa, which was based on a series of essays I wrote over the course of a year, where I took the Mensa test as a joke, and then I ended up getting in. And then the next year, it ended up being that's why I say I kind of stumbled into it, because I didn't realize there was a story there. And then there ended up being a pretty interesting story about this sort of right wave current and this supremacy logic that was going through what I sort of thought was like a bunch of dorks doing puzzles, which it isn't. But in any case, I ended up adapting that into a podcast, and that was ended up being kind of like this proof of concept of I really like doing this, and what else can I try this formula on? So I did a couple of podcasts in that formula, and my awesome editor, Allie Fisher, I had met her before, and she was like, every time you do one of these podcasts, you're basically writing a book. And I was like, no, I'm not. That isn't true. But it turned out to be sort of true. And so it was truly the hot dog concept was something that I pitched as a podcast, and they were like, no. And I was like, all right, I'll try. I'll repackage it and I'll pitch it as a book. And the book didn't exist. And I think I got lucky with timing, and that's how I ended up getting to write the book. It was really cool.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the book is one of the reasons we wanted to have you on here, we were tipped off to it by a super fan, Brittany. She was like, you have to get somebody on and you need to talk to Jamie Loftus. And we like taking a look at preservation from lots of different angles. And so this is, from my perspective, this is like capturing a moment in time, telling a story about something that's just so ubiquitous that sometimes it's overlooked. And that's, for me, one of the coolest things I think about history is just sort of the layers of history and how everything has a history.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, but the book is also it's in part sort of like a classic American travelogue built sort of loosely around the idea of like the American road trip. You talk about that a lot and sort of the experience of being on the road, like these crazy hotels that you're at and the experiences you have in some of them. And then, of course, like hot dogs are interjected into this throughout the whole time. Did anything in like the travel writing genre inspire you? Do you have a favorite from that genre of like people who go out and write these sort of like, we're going on the road to learn about ourselves and this particular thing? Anything that's like your favorite in that genre?
That's a really good question. I've read a lot of road trip books. I mean, I can't say I'm a Kerouac head. I can't say I do. I mean, it's like, he's got his issues and there are many, but I do like reading Hunter Thompson. I'm Not Made of Stone. He's fun to read. I think more what I was inspired by, because, yeah, I mean, it wasn't intended originally to be a road trip book. It sort of just became that because of how I had to do the research, because it did sort of become, I think, as was kind of unavoidable because I was doing all my research on the road in 2021. I was like, I couldn't just get on a plane. I think if I did this a couple years later, I would have like done different trips and flown out and all this stuff. And it became a road trip book, sort of like under my nose. I didn't realize that was going to be a part of it. I was pulling more from, I really love Mary Roach. I love her style of storytelling. She was definitely the person I was thinking about the most. And then I ended up kind of avoiding food writing until after I had finished, because I genuinely did not have really any experience in writing about food. And I was trying to like see how I would do it before I read a bunch of like classic food writing, because I was just afraid, I don't know, it's like that without intending to, I'd sort of start being like, oh, I should talk like this. This is how food writers talk.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and I think the cool thing about it, and obviously I've read it, I'm encouraging people to go and get it. We'll put a link in the show notes so that people can just pick it up and buy it directly from there, because it is a cool read just about, and there's a lot of great like history in it. So for the history nerds listening who want that aspect of it, or want to just hear about the regional varieties and how these sort of things developed, and you really go into like the sort of the lore and legend of hot dogs and stuff like that. That's all there. But it's also, you mentioned the pandemic. I mean, the way I sort of thought about this is it's almost like, I mean, COVID looms heavily over it. It's almost like a third passenger in the car, because spoiler alert, there's at least two of you to start in the vehicle. And did COVID, do you think that like, obviously, it changed the way it was written, which I didn't know kind of coming into this, in terms of you weren't able to fly. But did COVID also sort of accelerate it? Were you looking for a project because you're like, oh, my God, I'm stuck in the house. I need something to do like that? Or how did COVID, do you feel like, impact it or change the way it came out?
I mean, definitely the way it was reported on wouldn't have been, because I don't have a driver's license, right? Like it would not have been my first choice to drive everywhere.
Right.
And certainly not in the middle of a relationship that was very much on life support. But that was just sort of the option. I think in terms of like the timing of the book, I don't know this for sure, but my like headcanon for why this book sort of became possible is that there had not been travel books in a little while. And so I think like really sort of leaning on the travel component of the book was helpful in getting it made, because they're like, oh yeah, mysteriously, we haven't gotten a lot of travel pitches in the last year and a half. And like, I was pitching it during, I think one of the many sort of false starts of seeming like lockdown was easing. So it was proposed and approved between waves of COVID, when I think we all very naively were like, are we good? And then the travel happened when it was clear that wasn't the case. And so we had to be really, really careful. And it became, I mean, it was like impossible to not notice, but I think the timing of when I was reporting it made it even more of a labor book than I intended it to be,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm like very grateful for. But like as we were leaving, there was that sort of period in summer and fall 2021, the Great Resignation, where there were a lot of young people that were like, now hold on, like this, and leaving low wage jobs that they were not able to even, break even on. And, a really cool kind of moment of unionizing and social change and all this stuff that is so connected to the history of the hot dog, because the history of the hot dog is the history of meat processing unions and all of this stuff. So it was really cool for me to end up, I don't know, like I ended up feeling like, oh, everything is hot dogs, because as we were traveling, it was like, oh, this weird symbol is connected to all of the issues that we're experiencing outside. Like I thought the hot dog would kind of be like an escape project, and it wasn't. But I think in kind of a way that ended up being good.
Yeah, it's like the most, I mean, it's so cliche to be like, oh, it's so American, but it's like the most American thing in like every sense of it. Like it represents every aspect. And that's why I just also think it's really cool that you were able to capture that moment in time, because for a lot of us, we have a lot of different feelings about the pandemic. And going back and reading it and being sort of like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that aspect of it. Or, the different things that you comment on and then connect back, of course, to the hot dog. So, like the historic preservation community, of which we're a part of, talks a lot these days about what we call intangible cultural heritage. Like that's the highbrow term of it. But it's like the stuff we can't touch, but just isn't real and is important to us. So it's it's music, it's food, it's hot dogs. So I'm curious, you said that there wasn't something like this written. There's been some like hot dog history, but not like an exploration of like the different ways it plays out today. What do you feel about like the state of hot dog history and preservation? So why do you think we like overlook the story of something so obvious and ubiquitous? Like, why is it that, or, another way of putting it is like, why do you think hot dogs get like wacky museums, but airplanes, which are equally ubiquitous and utilitarian, get like the star treatment? Like they get, these like massive, sort of cathedrals. But in the end, it's a similar sort of, object. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious what you think about that. I think that I think that there's definitely a class component to, I think that like the innocuousness of the object is definitely tied into it, because it's like, well, why would we write a history of something that feels like we've had forever? And that is actually the exact reason why we should write about it, because we actually haven't had it forever, and, yada, yada, yada. But I do think that there is like a sort of dismissal of something because it's both ubiquitous and it's like quote unquote cheap. And I think about like all of these different facets of our daily life that we dismiss because we either take it for granted or because we associate it as like, well, that's not important. Like why would a 7-Eleven hot dog be important? Because I don't think that, I don't know. And again, I am like not this is going to sound dumb, seasoned food historian. But I do feel like there's a lot of higher end food gets a lot more press, even though a lot fewer people are eating it. And that is a problem, right? And so I think it's like I ended up kind of benefiting from the idea that it's like, who would write a history of the hot dog? But it's like, when you think about it, why not? And there had been absolutely, I think like most significantly, Bruce Craig wrote a really helpful hot dog history book, I believe in the early 2010s, that was extremely helpful to me. But it was, I think in terms of like a food social impact, that's still, I think for a lot of foods that are very common, kind of like glazed over in a way that, I can only speak to the hot dog, but it's a history of the culture that it's popular in. So there's a million ways to go with it. But yeah, I do sort of default to feeling like it's both ubiquitous and we think of it as poor people food. So who cares? That was sort of the general, or like it would be so goofy and silly to cover this thing. And you know, it is. I'm not saying it's not, but why do we feel that way? You know?
Yeah. And I think as the preservation community tries to think about things like that, restaurants and how we keep restaurants in business, in communities that are rapidly changing, and how do we retain that, like for lack of a better word, like the flavor of a community. It's incumbent upon us to think about things like that. And I think to use go so far as to say like a study like this, where this is, you're obviously, there's commentary and there's a lot of really good humor, but there's also like, it's sort of capturing a moment in time and telling us something about where culture and society is at this point. And, how the preservation community can think about these sorts of things, because I also think that the hot dog or whatever, sort of just everyday common thing that we run into, the donut, whatever it might be, maybe that's the next book, is something equally unhealthy to eat all across America.
You want me to die is what I'm hearing.
Is like, that it's a way to capture people to think about history and connections to the past as well. Like I feel like food is a great like gateway to that too.
Definitely.
So you came to Maryland where PreserveCast is recorded, and you hit Atman's, which you gave pretty high reviews.
Loved it.
If I remember correctly, it's rolled. I've only ever eaten I think pastrami on rye there. I never went for the hot dog. It just didn't seem. But it's rolled in bacon, or no, not bacon, in bologna. I think is, if I remember that right.
Yes, fried bologna.
Yeah.
Unreal.
So the space itself, you comment on that, how you're kind of like, and I remembered it. It's very well written in that like you're kind of wedged in there. It's unique. Do you think that like space has a significant impact on this? And I think that this is interesting for the preservation community, because like, does better architecture yield a better dog? And as a follow up to that, do you have a favorite hot dog joint architecture? Or could we do a hot dog architecture? Sort of, is there an architecture to this that you sort of identified, a typology as you went across the country?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite shape of hot dog building, it didn't make it in the book because it was actually in the act of being preserved when I was writing the book, and then it opened, I think in 2023, reopened. But Tale of the Pup in Los Angeles is a hot dog shaped hot dog business. And I don't feel like I can really, their hot dogs are good, I think, but I feel like when you're eating a hot dog from a hot dog shaped business, it's really kind of hard to know like how much of this is just serotonin of eating a hot dog from the hot dog. I mean, yeah, I feel like I'm a real kindergartner in that in that regard, where there was.
But you do like the dancing hot dog guy, like that's one of your you comment on that set, like right, the guy that like looks like he's dancing.
There's a right way to anthropomorphize a hot dog, and there's so many wrong ways to do it. But yes,
yes.
I like the little guy with the Mickey Mouse gloves. Like, why not? Why not? I think Atman's has a great architecture because it also feels like it has like the kibitz room too, right? Like there's the main deli space, and then there's like the community space, which I feel like is super crucial. I'm also thinking of, oh my gosh, sorry, I read this book 4 years ago. Let's see. I'm also thinking of the Varsity in Atlanta, which isn't a particularly interesting shape, but like it's so reflective of like where you are in a fascinating way, because there are rooms that are like the Ted Turner room. You're like, oh yeah, Ted Turner owns this city in a kind of like bizarro way. And you're eating a hot dog, but you're also experiencing something that would make absolutely no sense outside of Atlanta and barely makes sense inside of Atlanta. Like,
right.
I love stuff. I feel like Outman's is kind of similar, where you're like, yeah, this is a Baltimore Jewish deli, and like outside of this context, it makes no sense. And that's
Yeah.
what I love that about hot dogs, because it's like, I mean, I also love fast food because I'm a dirtbag, but that for some reason, outside of Wiener Schnitzel, which is like not super popular and also kind of sucks, like there isn't a big hot dog chain. There's just not. And so it's part of like the reason that I was like, I don't think that there is another kind of food of this nature I could write a book like this about, because there's not really another food that still to this day tends to be pretty localized. And I hope that that doesn't change. It's awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't seem. It's interesting. It really doesn't seem like it has. And so in that case, I guess the typology of the architecture is kind of all over the place. Do you like eating? So I guess sort of as a follow up to that, would you rather eat a hot dog outside or inside? Like, do you like the walk up dog experience, or do you like the sit down dog experience? And are we losing like the more traditional style hot dog restaurant? Like, is the architecture of that kind of slipping along with some of the other changes?
I think that there's a risk of it. I maybe am being overly optimistic. I don't think it'll ever fully. I don't think you can really take the hot dog from the people. You can try, and people do. There are a number of like weirdly gentrified feeling hot dog places. You're like, why is this hot dog $14? And then sometimes it's kind of good, and you're like, fuck, like, but so that, like every food made for people, like there's always going to be a gentrifier who finds a way to charge $14 for them, and like have it in this like vacuous white hole. And I don't know, like the hot dog is not immune to that, but I've found that when someone's local hot dog business is in peril, people show up. Like I think it would really take a lot, and that's something that I liked, or I felt like a good opportunity about food writing too, is like, food is not a non-starter for anyone. Like, so it's an opportunity to sort of like a hot dog, trick people into consuming what I think is interesting, and it's like wrapped in fried bologna. I don't think that the local hot dog business is going away anytime soon, because people of all stripes will riot if their favorite hot dog joint is closed, and I celebrate that.
Yeah. Indoor or outdoor dog, which
oh yes,
the people want to know.
Depends on the setting. I like outdoor as long as there's outdoor seating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not just like the walk up and then go figure it out yourself.
No, I'm too soft for that. I would like a chair, I'd like a seat, but outdoor seat, that's my final answer.
So, before we get to some rapid fires, throughout history, you make the connection that, difficult economic conditions, and you've kind of even mentioned it in this interview, seem to make the hot dog always more popular. And, with tariffs and everything sort of changing about the economy, do you feel like we should expect that to continue? Are we headed into yet another resurgence in dogs? And because it seems like every podcast has to ask it now, are hot dogs safe from AI?
I do not know if hot dogs are safe from AI. I do know that they're not safe from Robert F. Kennedy. That's something that like I've been talking about on. I just finished my paperback tour pretty recently, and did a presentation that was like everything that's happened with hot dogs in the last 2 years, because it's actually been like quite a bit has changed. And part of that is now that that RFK has a huge influence on food policy and the FDA, that meat processing plants, I think the thing I'm primarily worried about is that meat processing plant standards are going down. Unions are being further weakened. They were already not doing great when I was writing the book. I mean, they've been on a pretty steep decline for decades, and that's nothing against the folks that are in them and running them. But it's been a really hard space to unionize because of laws that I talk about in the book that are becoming more popular, ag laws that make it really difficult to self-report on dangerous conditions. It makes it basically illegal. And it makes it hard for reporters to get in. Like, you can't really have an Upton Sinclair style reporting gig like that without assuming a lot of risk, and not just physical risk. Now it's like legal risk as well. So that is compounded by the fact that RFK is intending to, we'll have to pass through some bureaucracy, but it is intending to, as the standards of meat fall, increase the amount of meat that people are encouraged to eat. Like, the intention is to adjust the food pyramid, which is already, cooked, but to expand the meat portion as meat becomes less safe. And so I think that there is a real risk to hot dog heads, hot dog consumers, that both the quality of their meat is going to go down, and by extension, the working conditions and conditions for animals are going to decrease as well, if things sort of continue to trend the way they've been trending. He has this initiative called MAHA. It's like Make America Healthy Again, and pushing, unhealthy food, but like made in a horrific way that is bad tip to tail, is a big part of that. So that's sort of my primary worry about where things are trending right now. But the upside, since I wrote the book, is that there are significantly more I'll say it, I'm not an economist. I don't know how the tariffs work. I just know that they're bad. But that at least as of right now, there are veggie and vegan hot dog options that are not disgusting, that are becoming more and more comparably priced in grocery stores. So if you are trying to avoid meat for any number of reasons, I think it is becoming generally easier to do so without it being a huge financial strain. So, sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, it's helpful to kind of just to sort of think about the future of something that's just so common and has been at least a big part of my life, and probably a lot of people's lives. So some rapid fire questions here. I think you at the end you refer to the people who want to know what the best hot dog you ate was. I think you'd call them sickos. So for the sickos out there, what was the best hot dog you ate, and why wasn't it Ted's in Buffalo?
Well, I want people to read the book, so I'm not going to say where I ate it, but the best style of hot dog I had was it was this. I didn't even know. I was like, it's genius. It's genius. It is a lightly fried hot dog. It is a hot dog that is dipped into a fryer for like 4 seconds, giving it this little crispy outer skin. You top it however the hell you want. A lightly toasted bun, just heaven. And yeah, I didn't, it's not something that you can make at home, which is why it's special, but the best hot dog you can make at home is on a grill or in a pan. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned in writing this book is that my family lied to me when they said, we're poor. All we can have is boiled hot dogs. It's like, no, we had a pan. We had a pan. The lesson is, if you've got a pot, you've got a pan, make the hot dog in the pan. You will thank yourself. There's no excuse for a boiled hot dog.
That we can put that on a bumper sticker. I would concur with that.
Yeah.
Growing up in a place where there was sort of a regional preference in terms of the brand of hot dog, I'm always surprised now living in Maryland, where it's just kind of like, well, you know what? I mean, there are some regional brands, but people seem much less wedded to one of them. I grew up as a Salen's family.
Oh, yes, of course, of course.
And then, of course, there was Wardinsky's if you needed to, or a Hoffman's Snapper.
You kind of
But
you grew up in a great hot dog region. You were spoiled.
yeah, definitely. Do you have a favorite brand of dog now that I mean, we don't want you to endorse, of course, unless you have a deal. I don't know if you've.
Not as things stand. I'm open to it.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think that. What is my favorite hot dog brand? I mean, there's a lot of specific places. Like, I have my notes on Chicago hot dogs, but Vienna beef is really good. It's really good, but you can't necessarily get that at any grocery store. I do also like the Costco dog. Hebrew National, I feel like, is my favorite. If I have to run to any grocery store, I think I would go Hebrew National.
And are any of the, I don't know if you say this in there, but like, I can't remember, but you might comment a little bit on like some of the longevity of some of these brands. Like, are there any legacy brands in the biz that, kind of warrant interest from the preservation community or should be taken a look at? I mean, for somebody who really loves like sort of tasting history, is like Hebrew National, they're pretty old, right?
Hebrew National is pretty old. I mean, I think the two like name brands that are ancient are Oscar Mayer's and Nathan's, both of whom have pretty interesting origin stories that are completely made up. And so I think that there is a lot of good sort of mythic folklore. There is American folklore attached to the hot dog. Particularly, I know a lot about Nathan's because, I mean, that lore stays alive every year on the 4th of July, and God knows why, but it happens, and I go every year.
And everybody talks about it. I was at a barbecue, and people were discussing it and talking about Kobayashi and Joey Chestnut. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went down the rabbit hole of looking at their Wikipedia and finding out all the other titles that they hold, because they're not just competitive when it comes to hot dogs. They cover the gamut of food.
Yes. No, I mean, it is if you have a strong stomach, there's some wild, and all of them are genuinely very different techniques where an oyster eater is not necessarily going to be a strong hot dog eater. Like, no accounting for it.
Yeah. When was the last time, like, do you still eat hot dogs? And what was the last one when was the last one you had?
What was the last hot dog I had? I think I had a Costco hot dog last week. I think
wow. Okay.
So this on a grocery run.
You're not grossed out by it at this point. It's not like there's no revulsion to it after that.
No, it's a part of my life. Oh no, you know what? This is depressing, but I got in really late in Kansas City the other night, and I got a Shake Shack hot dog. And you know what? It wasn't too bad. It was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's next? You make a joke about pizza in the book. We've mentioned donuts, but you also mentioned in this interview, which I had never really thought of, that hot dogs are one of the few sort of mass eaten foods that haven't been turned into like just a giant brand, not like Dunkin' Donuts that is now sort of like the ubiquitous American donut, I guess,
right?
Or Krispy Kreme, or in pizza, there's a lot of different sort of brands like that are national. Or does that not matter? What are you thinking about next?
I like to completely change things up every single time. After Raw Dog, I worked on a podcast for a year called 16th Minute, which is just is definitely an attempt at preservation of internet history, where every episode I talked to someone who sort of became the character of the day on the internet, sort of traced why that happened and talked about that experience with them, which was really fun. And now I just finished my first novel and am sort of getting back to working in fiction where I started. So just bouncing around, doing different stuff.
So, and people can find you. Where's the best place people should find you? We can put a link in the show notes too, but like, where would you send them for podcasts? And if they want to buy the novel, all those sorts of things, where do they go?
Go to my Instagram. That's the easiest. I need to update my website. Yeah, my Instagram is Jamie Christ Superstar on Instagram, and I have a link tree where my tour dates are. I'm going on tour at the end of the summer. You can get the book. You can listen to the podcasts. I get it. It's confusing.
Yeah, but you're sort of easy to find out there. I started listening to the podcast that you mentioned, which is really, it is capturing sort of a piece of history that is very ephemeral, actually. So I think it's kind of cool, and I think it'll be really helpful in the future for people who are interested in this moment in time. So before we go, we always ask this question: do you have a favorite historic place or site, something that just you could always go back to, that you just love the feeling of being there?
Ooh, this is local for me. I love going to Travel Town in Griffith Park. I love Griffith Park in general, but Travel Town, something about a big pile of trains in the middle of the woods. I just think it's delightful. And I go there to go on little meditative walks. You got to check out Travel Town.
Love it. We haven't heard that one before, so that's good to add to the list. Jamie, it's a pleasure. So fun to talk with you. Would love to chat with you again in the future. This has been great.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to PreserveCast. To dig deeper into this episode's story, head over to preservecast.org for show notes and our collection of previous episodes. Don't forget to engage with this podcast by subscribing, commenting, and leaving a review. Follow along on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PreserveCast for even more. PreserveCast is currently recorded in Walkersville, Maryland, and sponsored by the 1772 Foundation, and powered by Preservation Maryland. Thanks for listening, and keep on preserving.